This isn't just a story about a race car driver. It's about a man who completely reinvented the idea of what it means to win. We're going to deconstruct the system of Michael Schumacher, one of the most dominant figures in modern sports. But here's the thing. This isn't about raw speed or those breathtaking, heart-in-your-throat risks. It's about an architecture of thought, a complete re-engineering of what it takes to achieve total, absolute optimization.
And this single idea, it unlocks his entire career. See, his genius wasn't found in the spectacular highlight reel overtakes. It was hidden in the microscopic details that everyone else just dismissed. He had this profound understanding that real lasting dominance isn't about luck or some fleeting moment of bravery. No, it's about obsessing over micro-adjustments. A tiny tire pressure change, a gearbox shift that's just 2 milliseconds too slow, until victory becomes an inevitable, logical conclusion.
So this whole philosophy of total optimization, it was put to the ultimate test back in 1996. Schumacher arrives at Ferrari, this legendary team that was, frankly, lost in a 17-year championship drought. Their whole culture was running on passion, history, and that Italian glamour. But Schumacher saw this huge disconnect between their passion and their actual performance. He wasn't there to just be another hero in their story. He was there to rewrite their entire operating system from the ground up.
This right here gives us a key insight into how he thought and how he built his power. In a world of legacy and insiders, Schumacher's authority came from something else entirely: objective, undeniable knowledge. He basically weaponized the car's telemetry data through a system he called kinetic logic. He knew that understanding precisely why the car was underperforming was infinitely more powerful than just screaming for it to go faster. And that technical mastery, it became his most formidable weapon.
And that brings us to the absolute core of his philosophy: technical sovereignty. And make no mistake, this is a strategic choice. He wouldn't just rely on a gut feeling about the tires, for example. Oh no. He would analyze telemetry from every single practice session to pinpoint the exact tire pressure and temperature that saved, say, 0.02 of a second through one specific corner. Now, multiply that over 70 laps, and that tiny adjustment becomes a race-winning advantage. It's all about taking luck completely out of the equation. But this mindset, it wasn't born in some high-tech Ferrari garage. It was forged a long, long time before that.
Schumacher's journey to becoming this architect of precision actually began in the most unlikely of places. Before all the world titles, before the global fame, he was just a kid from Kerpen, Germany. And trust me, his path was anything but glamorous.
Just picture this for a second. A young Schumacher literally scavenging for used tires. This perfectly illustrates what we call the resource deficit he was facing. You see, junior motorsport is a world swimming in money. New parts, fresh engines, wealthy families funding it all. Schumacher had none of that. He was the ultimate outsider, picking through the trash of his competitors for tires they'd already thrown away. But this disadvantage, it became his greatest asset. It forced him to learn that grip wasn't something you just buy, it's something you earn through a superior understanding of physics.
And this comparison just lays it out so clearly, the two worlds he was navigating. The insiders, they could afford to be a little imprecise, right? A new engine or a fresh set of tires could cover up their mistakes. But as the outsider, Schumacher's only way forward was to be smarter, to be more disciplined. So his authority wasn't built on a family name or money, but on the undeniable truth of his data.
So instead of being defeated by not having enough resources, he completely flipped it. He turned that struggle into a forge for his mind. He developed what's been called an analytical hunger. He systematically unlearned the need for social approval and instead learned to trust only his own data. That isolation of those early years didn't break him. It built this internal fortress of logic and precision that would become the foundation for everything that came next.
So all of this early experience, it shaped a concrete philosophy that would go on to define his career and, in a lot of ways, the sport itself. Out of the friction of those scavenger years, this incredibly powerful and disciplined mindset started to emerge.
This became his new rule, and it was a complete rejection of that romantic idea of a driver as some reckless gambler. Schumacher understood that victory wasn't found in one single grand sweeping moment. No. It was in the relentless accumulation of tiny, almost invisible details. He realized that every time you just hope for a win instead of meticulously calculating it, you're just giving away your power.
This philosophy is built on what the source calls granular consistency. He saw his main job not just as driving fast, but as being the most precise data-gathering instrument for his engineers.
He would meticulously document the performance of every single component after a run, giving feedback on how a minor change in a wing angle affected stability in a specific sector. He truly believed that if he gave his team perfect information, the wins would just follow.
This metaphor of the cockpit as a laboratory is so revealing about his whole approach. For so many drivers, the cockpit is a stage for performance. For him, it was a lab. Every single lap, whether it was in practice, qualifying, or the race itself, was a controlled experiment. He was constantly testing, constantly analyzing, always searching for objective truths about the car's performance. His goal was to find that undeniable data that could be used to make the entire system better.
Now, this experimental mindset wasn't just a theory, right? It was put into practice through a really rigorous system. And that system was perfected at Fiorano, Ferrari's private test track, where Schumacher would famously run laps late into the night long after everyone else had packed up and gone home.
One of his most powerful tools was the feedback audit, this three-step process you see right here. First, he would identify a tiny, almost imperceptible vibration. Then he'd define it. He wouldn't just say, "the car feels weird." He'd articulate it with mechanical precision, like the rear left is vibrating at 80 Hz through the mid-corner phase. Finally, he would force a solution. He would just keep driving, keep testing, and keep providing data until the engineers made a fix and the telemetry proved his initial feeling was dead-on correct.
And this audit was part of a much bigger pattern of deliberate, purposeful movement. The source calls it systematic kinematics. It sounds complex, but put simply, it just means that every single action on the track had a purpose. There were no wasted movements. I mean, think of his pioneering use of left foot braking. That wasn't just some new technique, it was a rhythmic, repeatable habit that let him maintain car stability and gather more consistent data lap after lap, basically wearing down the competition through sheer precision.
And this relentless pursuit of the tenth of a second, that was the real engine behind his success. While other drivers were out there chasing magazine covers and the glory of a dramatic win, Schumacher was playing a totally different game. He was on this obsessive hunt for marginal gains, just letting the telemetry and the stopwatch do all the talking. His focus was absolute, and it built an empire.
So what was the long-term payoff of all this? Well, it was way more than just trophies. It was a complete transformation of his professional identity that fundamentally redefined what it even meant to be a driver. I mean, he was one of the first to embrace a really rigorous physical and mental training regimen, treating himself like an elite athlete, which basically set a new standard for the entire sport.
I love this timeline because it doesn't track his career by his 7 world titles, it tracks it by the evolution of his identity. He started as the scavenger, forced to learn physics from scraps. He became the rookie who used data to just shock the establishment. Then, as the rebuilder, he taught a passionate but broken team the language of precision. And finally, he emerged as the architect, a man who didn't just win races, but designed a system that made winning a predictable outcome.
Schumacher's real legacy is this principle of micro-adjust for macro results. He proved that the most important work isn't always the most glamorous. A tiny adjustment to tire pressure found after hours of relentless testing could be more valuable than a dozen risky overtakes. He completely dismantled the myth that success is about raw bravery and replaced it with a new reality. The only thing that truly matters is unvarnished technical optimization.
You know, Schumacher's journey really suggests that real power doesn't come from taking the biggest risk, but from building the best system. It's a powerful guide for anyone who feels like an outsider in their field, maybe overshadowed by people with more resources. It shows there's a path to mastery, and it's paved with precision.
So I want you to ask yourself, what is your personal testing ground? What is the area in your work, your studies, or your life where you can apply this level of deep, systematic focus? Where can you stop just doing the work and actually start running experiments to find the truth?
Here's a way you can start. First, find a task you just take for granted. It could be as simple as how you organize your inbox, or how you prepare for a meeting, or practice a skill. Second, commit deeply to the micro-adjustment. Find one small variable you can improve. Third, stop looking at a lack of resources, time, money, connections, as a weakness. Use that resource deficit to fuel your own analytical hunger. And finally, start mastering the outcome by building a system that guarantees it.
Because ultimately, this is the takeaway. Talent isn't just something you're born with, it's a choice you make through discipline. Greatness isn't found in a single heroic moment. It's coded into the precision of the system you build, day after day, millimeter by millimeter. So the next time you're facing a challenge, remember the Schumacher system and the profound power of precision.